Welcome to Contemporary First Nation Voices. This is NBE 3C, grade 11 English college level, and this is Jillian Percy. Today is class 22, and we're going to be working on key questions 33 and 34 today. Here are all the ways to contact us. If you want to talk to me while I'm in the studio, 1-800-465-7144. The office number is 1-800-667-3703, extension 2211. One thing I want to point out is when the office closes at 4:30, it doesn't ring through to the back, even if I'm here. I apologize. The fax number is 1-800-463-7852. That's if you're in Ontario. If you're in the rest of Canada, 1-877-990-2023. My email is jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. I feel like I should add it's Jillian with a G, which I know is uncommon, just in case. And then Facebook, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. And that will have that little fall scene down below that you can see if you're looking at your screen. If you send me a message on Facebook, please always send me a like a friend request, and let me know what your real name is, because most people don't use the real name on their Facebook. So then, like if you're Stacy, Stacy Sunshine on Facebook, I need to look for Stacy, Sakakizak or something like that on our database. I need to know who you are. And then if you want to watch the previous classes, there's two different YouTube channels. There's my teacher one that has stuff from last year and this year, and there will be a playlist on it that will say NBE 3C 2024, 2025, and it will have all the classes I've taught so far. And then there's the school channel, which is called WASA Distance Education YouTube channel. That is really helpful if you're taking a lot of different courses from us, because rather than having to bunch around to all the different teachers' channels, you can just grab one. There is previous recordings out there of this class from last year from another teacher. Please don't use that. I've changed this course quite a bit since then, so it won't be helpful to you, okay? Hang on. All right, our most asked question, how to hand in work. There are so many different ways that you can hand in assignments. We try to make it really flexible. If you have a learning center, one of the easiest ways is give it to your DEC, ask them to scan it, and then email it to me. If you do that, please make sure to hang on to your originals. Don't give them to the DEC, because you may need them for assignments later on, like there's a portfolio project at the end of this one. You can also fax it to me, 1-800-463-7852, that's in Ontario, or 1-877-990-2023, that's national. If you are planning to fax it, it's a good idea to either write in pen or to use your computer, because I find when things are faxed, they come up very light. It's kind of hard to see them. You could also scan it yourself using a scanner app on your phone and then send it to me. I'll talk to you a little bit more how to do that in a minute. You could mail it to me, but I really don't recommend it. If you do that, absolutely, you have to make sure you hang on to the originals. Only send me the photocopies. It will take a long time, and things do sometimes get lost. That's not my recommended way. If you use Google Docs to create your assignments, you can share documents with me. Make sure to either include me as a viewer or an editor so I can see them. You could also hand assignments in by photograph through Facebook or email. When you're doing that, the photo must be clear, not blurry, so I can read the writing. Again, preferably written in pen so it's dark enough for me to read. The photo should be taken with the phone parallel to the assignment so the writing doesn't get twisted. Please don't just click on the share button. It will come up as a very odd size on my computer. And don't cut and paste it into the body of the email. Instead, save it as a file to your phone and then attach it to an email that you send to me. Whenever you hand in work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. Then when you do this, the secretary can log that you submitted the work. It's also then in that database. If you send it to me, no one else can see it but myself, which sounds like it's perfect, except sometimes other people take over courses. Sometimes we transfer who's teaching a course. If you don't finish this year and want to finish next year, it's just really helpful to have it in a database that's a little more flexible than in our own personal emails here. Whenever you hand an assignment, write on the assignment, please make sure is your full name, your course name, the assignment name and number. And if an assignment asks for both a rough and a good draft, please label which one is which and include them both in the same email. If an assignment doesn't ask for a rough draft, I would request that you don't send it in, because there's not really a lot of point. And sometimes I end up marking them thinking they're the good copy and then later on find in the package, oh, wait, here's the good copy. And then I got to kind of remark it all again. So better not to send it if I don't ask for it. Okay. This is a little poster. I did not make this poster from Adobe Scan. They are a nice little app you can use on your phone. You can use other scanner apps. I use Adobe Scan myself just because it is a very reliable company. It's free. It's pretty easy to use. Once you've installed it, open it up. You can hold your device over your photograph, over your assignment, just like you're taking a photograph. The thing with this scanner is it's just going to take a way better picture than simply the phone will. It's just because of whatever they do with the app mechanics. It's really going to produce a better document for me. When you do this, you can adjust the borders. Like if you happen to get part of the table in, you can kind of shrink the borders. If you have more pages in the assignment, just keep on doing 2 and 3 over and over again until you've got all the pages for the assignments done. Tap continue. Then you can go through the scan. You can redo a photo if it's not right. You can reorder the pages, save the PDF, give it a name like, assignment 13, whatever it is. Save it to Google Drive, Dropbox, your computer, and then send me a copy of the assignment. If you're doing this, I recommend not putting a whole chunk of assignments together at once. Just do one assignment. And then if you want to rescan and do a second one and send me several, that's fine. But if you happened to need to go back through and fix an assignment, it's a little bit easier if it's not like one of 40 pages and it's only one of like 5 pages. Okay. We are working on the plan for the week. Today is, oh, you know what? Looks like I jumped ahead my days here because it is actually March 20th, not March 21st. And we are on, like I said, class 22. And we're working on 33, 34. We don't normally have a class tomorrow, but we will this week because I had to be away on Tuesday, okay? All right. I mention this kind of every time just in case people are confused. Some assignments have been added, changed, or eliminated from last year's course, so the numbers I am showing may not match your originals. You are welcome to hand in either the original you got or a revised version into the end of this school year. However, I do suggest you call me and get the revised version if possible. The reason I made changes was either assignments were duplicates, they were confusing, or there were assignments that were missing that need to be included to cover expectations that the government has. Because these videos stay on the internet for a while, you could be watching this many months from now. If it is September 2025 and later than that, please make sure you get the revised version from me, because at that point, that is the only thing that would be useful, okay? The original will be long gone at that point. Okay, we are still working through Unit 3, which is Truth and Reconciliation. As we've talked about, I know this is a challenging unit. If you find it triggering, please reach out and ask for help. If you're struggling with an assignment, it's fine to send me a little message letting me know. You can put it off or we can skip it. We can figure something out. I'm always willing to kind of work with people and figure out what to do differently, okay? Okay, so we are still working through lesson 12, and I think we'll be finished that today. So in this lesson, you're going to examine the question, what is reconciliation and why is it necessary in order to revitalize the relationship between Aboriginal peoples and Canadian society? The goals for this is that you're going to read a couple articles by Justice Murray Sinclair and watch a short video by him. You will give your opinion of his message in a properly formatted paragraph. I think we actually do a few more things, but that will start. So what is reconciliation? The Government of Canada states that reconciliation is a fundamental purpose of Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. Reconciliation is an ongoing process through which Indigenous peoples and the Crown work cooperatively to establish and maintain a mutually respectful framework for living together, with a view to fostering strong, healthy, and sustainable Indigenous nations within a strong Canada. As we build a new future, reconciliation requires the recognition of rights and that we all acknowledge the wrongs of the past, know our true history, and work together to implement Indigenous rights. This transformative process involves reconciling the pre-existence of Indigenous peoples and their rights, and the assertion of sovereignty of the Crown, including inherent rights, title, and jurisdiction. Reconciliation based on recognition will require hard work, changes in perspectives and actions, and compromise and good faith by all. So that's kind of a lengthy, long thing. I'm going to kind of give an analogy, right? If you and your partner split up and you decided you wanted to get back together again, you would be reconciling. And in that process of reconciling, you might have to have a lot of conversations. You might need to make some apologies. You might need to discuss how you're going to do things differently in the future. Essentially, Canada is kind of going through that same process. The government of people of Canada and the European kind of Canadians trying to kind of reconcile with Indigenous people and with the wrongs that were done to them. So that's kind of the idea, kind of repairing a relationship. Reconciliation frames the Crown's actions in relation to Aboriginal and treaty rights and informs the Crown's broader relationship with Indigenous peoples. The Government of Canada's approach to reconciliation is guided by the UN Declaration. They're talking about the one about the UN Declaration of Indigenous Rights, the TRC's calls to action, the constitutional values, and collaboration with Indigenous peoples, as well as provincial and territorial governments. And that is, I'm giving you the link there, but basically it's from the Canadian government side. The above statement is a quote from the Canadian government website on principles respecting the Government of Canada's relationship with Indigenous peoples. They state these principles are due to the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which requires transformative change in the government's relationship with Indigenous peoples. The UN Declaration is a statement of the collective and individual rights that are necessary for the survival, dignity, and well-being of Indigenous peoples around the world, and the government must take an active role in enabling these rights to be exercised. There is a poster on the next slide that kind of lists the rest of the principles, because it's the reconciliation part is sort of one section out of this overall principles. The Government of Canada recognizes that, number one, all relations with Indigenous peoples need to be based on the recognition and implementation of their right to self-determination, including the inherent right of self-government. Number two, reconciliation is a fundamental purpose of Section 35 of the Constitution Act 1982. Number three, the honor of the Crown guides the conduct of the Crown in all of its dealing with Indigenous peoples. When they're saying Crown there, that's kind of like a short form or symbol for the Government of Canada. Number four, Indigenous self-government is part of Canada's evolving system of cooperative federalism and distinct orders of government. I don't know what they're heading at for there. I think kind of the idea that there are different layers and levels of government within Canada, and the Indigenous self-government is one of those layers. 5, treaties, agreements, and other constructive arrangements between Indigenous peoples and the Crown have been and are intended to be acts of reconciliation based on mutual recognition and respect. Number 6, meaningful engagement with Indigenous peoples aims to secure their free, prior, and informed consent when Canada proposes to take actions which impact them and their rights on their lands, territories, and resources. Number 7, respecting and implementing rights is essential, and that any infringement of Section 35 rights must, by law, meet a high threshold of justification, which includes Indigenous perspectives and satisfies the Crown's fiduciary obligations. I'm going to make this bigger for a second so I can read it. My old eyes are struggling here. Number 8, reconciliation and self-government require a renewed fiscal relationship, that's money, developed in collaboration with Indigenous nations that promotes a mutually supportive climate for economic partnership and resource development. In other words, the government needs to change how they deal with Indigenous nations in how they handle money and in how they handle any kind of resource development like mining, for example, which is such a contentious issue. Number 9, reconciliation is an ongoing process that occurs in the context of evolving Indigenous Crown relationships. And then number 10, a distinctions-based approach is needed to ensure that the unique rights, interests, and circumstances of the First Nations, the Métis Nation, and the Inuit are acknowledged, affirmed, and implemented. Honest, I'm not 100% sure what they mean when they're saying distinctions, because they clearly have a very specific phraseology for that. Okay, so I was kind of working on things today, and I realized really kind of need to do a little bit of background on the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I kind of wanted to go more in depth because we're going to be talking about Justice Murray Sinclair, who was, I think he was the lead commissioner of the committee and was a hugely influential figure in running the committee. So the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was officially launched in 2008 as part of the Indian Residential Schools Settlement Agreement, intended to be a process that would guide Canadians through the difficult discovery of the facts behind the residential school system. The TRC was also meant to lay the foundation for lasting reconciliation across Canada. So this is just kind of, I included this because it's in their photograph, in their article. This is a picture of one of the residential schools. It's a Roman Catholic residential school in Fort Chipewyan in Alberta. And the picture was taken around about 1930. Hang on. When it says circa, it means kind of around. They may not know exactly. Hang on a second. Sorry, I'm still struggling with a little bit of a cough here. Background. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada was created, yep, we did that. The multifaceted agreement, widely understood to be one of the largest settlement packages in the history of the country, was intended to compensate survivors for the harms they suffered in residential schools and to work towards a more just and equitable future for Indigenous peoples. Schedule 9 of the URSA was the TRC's official operating mandate. Divided into 14 sections, the mandate outlined an ambitious set of goals, activities, and requirements that the commissioners of the TRC were supposed to follow. A few specific responsibilities given to the commission include hosting at least 7 national events, issuing a final report, establishing a national research center, collecting all relevant documents from other church and government entities, overseeing and approving a $20 million commemoration fund, hosting community events, regional liaisons, statement gathering and truth sharing, and an active research agenda. In addition to outlining the tasks to be completed by the TRC, the URSA established a 5-year timeframe and a $60 million budget for the commission to complete these tasks. As later would be seen, fulfilling this mandate would prove challenging. Some of the early work and the challenges they faced. The commission originally started with the appointment of 3 commissioners: Justice Harry Laforme, an Ontario Court of Appeal judge and member of the Mississaugas of New Credit First Nation, lawyer Jane Bruin Morley, and Indigenous health expert Claudette Dumont-Smith. Despite high hopes, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission soon experienced difficulties. Less than 6 months after being appointed the chair, Justice Harry Laforme resigned from the commission, citing conflict with the commissioners, insurmountable challenges, and government interference. The other commissioners followed suit some 3 months later. By March 2009, the TRC was seeking for 3 new commissioners to run the committee. A new beginning. So by June 2009, 3 new commissioners were appointed and officially recognized in a ceremony on July 1st. These new commissioners were Justice Murray Sinclair, an Ojibwe judge from the Court of the Queen's Bench, Manitoba, lawyer Chief Welton Littlechild from Mesquasis, Obama, Alberta, and Marie Wilson, a well-known CBC broadcaster from Yellowknife and Northwest Territories. Faced with the daunting task of quickly moving to re-establish the commission and to rebroker trust with Indigenous peoples following the initial failure of the original TRC. The commission relocated its head offices from Ottawa to downtown Winnipeg in an effort to maintain independence and to be closer to populations of survivors. The commission also moved quickly to hire a new executive director, followed by directors of the main functional areas of the commission's mandate. In an effort to draw public attention, the Commission planned its first national event for June 2010 at the Forks National Historic Site in Winnipeg. This 4-day outdoor event saw thousands of people listen to survivors at sharing circles, participate in a large powwow celebration, and attend concert performances by well-known artists such as Buffy Sainte-Marie and Blue Rodeo. This was obviously pre all the issues with Buffy Sainte-Marie's Indigenous heritage. This first event shaped preceding national events, all of which came to share a number of core elements, including the lighting of a sacred fire, a 4-day format, a call to gather each day, and opportunities for survivors to share their truth with the Commission in both public and private settings. The event also marked the induction of a TRC honorary witness, then Governor General Michel Jean. Next steps and more challenges. Shortly after the Winnipeg National event, there was another staff turnaround. The Commission's Director of Research resigned, as did the Executive Director and the National Events Planning Team. Additionally, the Commission began to apply pressure to government and church entities to produce their documentary records to the Commission as per the terms of the settlement agreement. While some entities complied willingly, document production would prove to be one of the most challenging elements of the Commission's mandate, seeing the TRC in court on 5 separate occasions for a variety of document collection issues. In other words, people didn't want to hand their documents over because they didn't want people to see what was literally recorded in their own organization's documents. That's churches and government. Despite these challenges, the main activities of the Commission continued to advance. The second national event was held in Nunavut, Northwest Territories in June 2011, followed by events in Halifax and Saskatoon in 2012, Montreal and Vancouver in 2013, and the final national event in Edmonton in 2014. Throughout this time, the TRC Commissions conducted community hearings across the country, visiting over 70 communities for formal hearings and many others for community events and public outreach activities. Statement gathering programs and the TRC's research program continued as well. The Commission also oversaw the disbursement of 2 funding packages, totaling $20 million for commemoration activities across the country. These funds stimulated the creation of a range of commemorative events, which included permanent community commemoration markers, such as that created in Williams Lake, BC, in addition to some impressive works of art, such as artist Carrie Newman's Witness Blanket and the Royal Winnipeg Ballet's Going Home Star Ballet. Creation of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation. By the summer of 2019, the Commission was preparing for the end of its mandate. Granted a 1-year extension, the commissioners and research staff retrenched to focus on finalizing the daunting but exhaustive work of the final report, in addition to completing the document collection mandate of the Commission. With a collection now totaling close to 7,000 statements and some 5 million records, establishing a permanent home for these materials became pressing. Following an extensive call for proposals and a series of formal discussions, the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation was awarded to the University of Manitoba. The NCTR was recognized as the permanent home for all statements, documents, and other materials collected by the TRC over the course of its mandate. In addition to this task, the NCTR was responsible for continuing the journey of truth and reconciliation, especially in the areas of public education, research, and access to the collection. Sorry, guys. The official closing ceremonies of the Commission took place in June 2015 in Ottawa, concluding 6 years of work and effort by the Commission. During these ceremonies, the TRC presented 4 summary reports, including 1 report dedicated solely to recounting the voices of survivors. The final complete version of the report was released on December 15, 2015, marking the final chapter in the Commission's activities and their mandates. So if you want to see more about that, there is a website called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. There is all sorts of documents and resources here if you want to take a look at that. So I want to have a quick reminder about the writing process because we're going to assign a research project here, and I wanted to kind of review how to do it. In previous units, we did walk through the 5 stages of the writing process. As we begin the second half of the course, it is expected that you will continue to use these processes to create your best work. I find that the most critical step to good writing is the one that many students most want to skip, which is the planning stage. For an assignment that includes internet research, the planning stage is generally going to come second in a way after you do the research. But one important step to doing good internet research is having some specific questions that you want to find answers to. I suppose that becomes kind of part of the planning. Developing good questions can take a bit of thought. Sometimes the assignment will lay out a general topic or question that they want you to gather information on, and you might use that main question to create smaller, more specific research questions. Here's an example of what I mean. In our next assignment, you're going to need to pick one of the 3 Truth and Reconciliation Commissioners to research. The assignment specifically says, create a paragraph that gives a brief biography, some of their accomplishments, and how those achievements had an impact on other Indigenous peoples. So we're going to turn those 3 phrases into separate questions. Number 1, what are the major important events in this person's life? Typically, when people are writing a biography, which is like a little story about a person, they're going to state the facts about their birth date, their birthplace, who their birth family was, any kind of important school or work history events, marriage, and children. Number 2, what are their important achievements? This might include anything major they've done with their work, political successes, published books, art, films, or performances. It might also include any important awards that they have won. How did their achievements impact or affect other Indigenous people? This is a tricky one. Sometimes this can be really obvious, and it might even be directly stated in an article that you're researching. For example, this person changed laws that helped Indigenous people have more freedom. Other times it can be a lot less obvious. If a person from a specific culture or heritage is the first to do a certain job, that can often pave the way for other people to do the job as well. That's one way. Sometimes they might have created a specific organization that helped Indigenous peoples in certain ways. You're going to have to sometimes state your own opinion about how they affected others. And it may be involving a little bit of a conclusion or an inference where you have to kind of read between the lines. That's fine. Just be sure to ground it in a specific example, such as, I believe this person affected others around him by serving as a role model through, and then you would kind of explain what they did that you feel makes them a good role model. What are some other questions that you might have that would make your research interesting to read? Sometimes this stuff can be very dry if you just stick to biological facts and awards. So we don't want to do dry writing. Dry writing is basically boring writing. So what can we do to make it more interesting? There are a lot of possibilities, but this is just a short project. So you're probably just going to want to think of a few. This is a practice one because we have a longer research project that comes up at the end of this course. So we're doing kind of a little mini thing now to kind of get some practice. Some ideas you might want to think about is, what makes this person special? Does what they achieved or worked on affect me, my family, or my community, directly or indirectly? What do I admire or dislike about this person? Will their work have a lasting effect on the world around them for good or for bad? So, gathering internet research and recording it. One of the big difficulties in the internet age is the ease with which we can cut and paste information from an article directly into our own assignments. Stop! Did you know this is considered plagiarism, which is a type of cheating? When you're writing an assignment, the words need to be your own. The best way to do this is avoid using cut and paste, no matter how tempting it might be. It seems easier, but in the long run, it actually ends up making things harder. Instead, cut and paste just the URL where you found the research, so you can go back to that website and list it as a resource. Then, as you read the article, simply make some notes in your own words about what you're reading. Right away, this helps you avoid plagiarizing. It also forces you to think about what the information really means and to put it into vocabulary that you understand. If you're writing down words that are in a research article and you don't know what they mean, don't do that, because you don't know what you're writing then if you repeat it, right? At the very least, you would want to look things up. If you find an article that is too long and too detailed, it may not be as helpful as an article that is a bit shorter and easier to read. And I'm thinking, there was somebody one time who found like an anthropological article, and it was full of really long words and really specific vocabulary that only anthropologists would know. And it was so very clearly not that person's work. It was words that I wouldn't even know. So that's what I'm saying, is you kind of want to be a little bit cautious that you do understand the article that you're reading, and that you're not just kind of cutting and pasting stuff that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense, right? It can also help if you're looking for answers to a specific question that you created, like we just did, right? We created some questions, instead of simply trying to write down every single piece of information you see. That's what happens sometimes. That's too much, right? Of course, people don't want to do that. The key to good research is prioritize. In other words, choose what's important and don't bother about the rest. Okay, so when you're researching, like I said, choose a specific question. So let's say I've asked, did they win any awards? I might look up the person's name plus awards and see what comes up. I'm going to use a different one than who we're working on. Elijah Harper plus awards. So when I put that in, this is the top of the page. If I keep scrolling down, obviously there's way more. Now, there are different websites, and I'm trying to think if I've talked about it in this course, but Wikipedia is generally not considered a reliable resource, which sometimes surprises people because it's almost always the first thing that comes up. The reason is Wikipedia can be edited by many different people. That means there's no guarantee that the information on there is actually correct. And there's all sorts of incidents where people deliberately put hoaxes on, deliberately tried to destroy people's reputation, or caused problems in a deliberate way because they thought it was funny, right? So it isn't necessarily considered the best source. Sometimes it can be a place to get started, but I would be cautious about quoting anything from Wikipedia if I couldn't also find it somewhere else, which is why I'm saying better just to look somewhere else in the first place. Okay, so I'm saying, what awards did he win? And I came across this particular little section here. Now, I can read every single bit of this if I want to, but because I'm only looking for that question, I could just look for those questions, right? I'm looking for awards. Awards, awards, awards. His efforts garnered him distinction and accolades such as the Canadian Press Newsmaker of the Year Award. So I put that there. He also got the Stanley Knowles Humanitarian Award. Okay, I'm going to write that here. Stanley Knowles Humanitarian Award. Okay. Member of the Red Sucker Lake First Nations. Chief at 29. So here's the funny thing. Do I want to say Chief at 29 as an award? It's not quite. It's kind of more of an accomplishment. So I'm going to kind of add it here as accomplishment. Sorry. Chief at 29 for Red Sucker Lake First Nation. Okay. So there's some other ones that he got, right? He was named to cabinet in, what is it, 1996, 1986. Minister without portfolio, responsible for Native affairs. Okay, so 1986. Named to cabinet. Okay, so I'm running a little bit of room out here. If I was doing this for my thing, I would just keep on adding it. The tricky part for me is I don't want to, get this kind of overloaded. So if I was doing this, so I would now kind of here, I'm going to see if I can get this to work properly. Hang on a sec. Copy. Okay. All right, sorry. It's one of those goofy things sometimes. So here I've got this. So if I was working in my office or whatever, I would have my little notes here, and I would have maybe a little paper here or my computer or whatever I'm doing it on. And I would kind of start to turn some of my notes into sentences. Elijah Harper has won awards like the Canadian Press Newsmaker of the Year award. He also won the Stanley Knowles Humanitarian Award. Now, I might want to include why if I know why. Like that one didn't particularly tell me the reason. It might be something I want to look up though, because I'm curious, like, was he doing some sort of special volunteer work? What was he doing? Some of his accomplishments are, now I don't like that. I'm going to change it. He became chief of Red Sucker Lake First Nation when he was only 29 years old. So I'm taking my little notes, I'm turning them into my own sentences. Because I'm putting them into my own sentences, I'm not plagiarizing, right? Now, these are kind of bare bones sentences. I might want to play around with them later on and make them a little more interesting, but I'm just kind of trying to show you how I would start. This is kind of where I'm gathering the information. Here is a different piece of information. I forget where I got this from. I'm sorry. Normally I try and put the URL on there. This one mentions a little bit more information about his awards. Now, they often mention awards and accomplishments at the same time. So this one, I kind of created one spot for awards and another spot for accomplishments. And then I would go through, I'm deliberately using stuff like computer stuff, but you probably have just like a pencil in your hand, and you might make little notes. So one thing that Harper is really well known for is that he made Canadian history when he blocked the Canadian constitutional amendment known as the Meech Lake Accord. That was huge. During the same year, they voted him newsmaker, probably because of that, right? He was awarded the Stanley Knowles. Again, it doesn't say why, though. We already have that information. He also was bestowed the title of Honorary Chief for Life, which I think is different than the 29. In addition to these honors, he received the Commemorative Medal of Canada from the Governor General, and he continues to earn honors and accolades. They don't quite say what they are. So he was also elected as a member of Parliament in Northern Manitoba in 1993. So I would add these, and then I would make some little sentences off of those as well. I'm going to kind of skip over here. Oh, yeah, definitely. Once you've got that, you've researched the rest of your questions, you should have a few pages of rough notes and sentences, and then you can put them all together into a structured paragraph. Think about how you want to introduce this person. What is the main idea the reader needs to know about them? How do you want to structure the paragraph? Chronological order is a pretty typical way to organize a biography, but sometimes people want to cover the most important accomplishments right away and then fill in the important details as they go, the way a newspaper article does. You get to decide how you want to do it. Always remember to use basic paragraph structure. It is the thing I look for every single time I read anything that you write. A topic sentence, your body sentences, and your closing sentence. The topic sentence is how you introduce the person. The body sentence is going to tell you all the most important details about this person. And then the closing sentence should provide a conclusion or a wrap up to the information that states the main idea in a new or interesting way. Okay, revising and editing. These are two different stages, but a lot of people tend to work on them at the same time. Other people try to skip these two stages altogether. I firmly believe that's a mistake, not because I'm a teacher, but because everybody is capable of improving their writing. And sometimes it doesn't take very long. I think people think, oh my gosh, it'll take me hours. No, honestly, you know what? Set a timer, sit down and look at your work, spend 20 minutes trying to make it better. You would be surprised how much you could improve a paragraph, a page, just by spending 10, 15 minutes trying to go over it, make it a little bit better, okay? Here are a few suggestions. When you're revising, that is when you are focused on the big picture improvements that need to be made. Does your paragraph make sense? Have I included major events? Have I made sure to leave out minor details? Did I make sure to put it in my own words? Does the paragraph include the opening and closing sentences? Editing is the smaller and fussy stuff. Some people really need these to be two separate things. Some people kind of tend to go along and do them both at the same time. There's no right or wrong way. Editing is the conventions. Things like, did I remember to capitalize the sentences and the word I? Did I use commas, apostrophes, and periods correctly? Did I check for spelling mistakes and commonly confused words? Did I use grammar correctly? A lot of times, these both can be helped by reading out loud to yourself and hearing how it sounds. Sometimes our eyes don't catch the mistakes, but when we hear it, we go, oh, wait, that needs to be changed a little bit different. And then publishing is basically, once you're happy with it, you can send it to me. Okay, so there are three main commissioners we talked about: the Honorable Murray Sinclair, Wilton Littlechild, Dr. Maria Wilson. So these are the second batch that ended up overseeing the commission for the majority of the time period. So these are the ones I want us to research, okay? You can read more about them following that link, and you can also just as at any point, look them up online. They've done a lot of different things, not just this. So there's a lot to read about them. And then question 33 is worth 20 marks. Pick one of the three Truth and Reconciliation commissioners to do internet research on. Create a paragraph that gives a brief biography, some of their accomplishments, and how their achievements had an impact on other Indigenous people. At the end of the paragraph, please include the names and URLs for at least 2 different websites where you found information. See the rubric for writing an informational paragraph. So I always include these so that you understand what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking that you have good knowledge of the topic and that you understand how to write an informational paragraph. That is worth 6 possible marks. Then I'm looking at your critical and creative writing skills. Critical is where you're reading stuff and deciding what's important. And the creative is more like how you're putting it together as a paragraph. That's also going to be worth 6 marks. Communication is more like your writing style, your sentence structure, your paragraph structure, how you make everything sound. That's 4 marks. And then application, using the language conventions correctly. That's spelling, grammar, capitalization, and then using the informational paragraph format correctly. It kind of comes up more than once because it's just such an important issue. Okay. And then question 34 is kind of very similar. Hopefully we'll get finished this one. This is about Justice Murray Sinclair, who was the chief commissioner from 2009 to 2015. There's a newspaper article below that explains his answer to the question about what steps are needed for the reconciliation. There is also an interview he did, which is recorded on YouTube at this link. It's definitely worth watching. It gives you kind of a bigger picture of what he believes and how he speaks. He's a very interesting person to listen to. In a properly formatted paragraph, summarize and explain his ideas about reconciliation. Remember that a paragraph should have an opening sentence that introduces the topic, a closing sentence that restates it and wraps up the ideas. This paragraph should be between 1/2 to 3/4 of a page long, okay? So kind of a longer paragraph. So this article was originally taken from this particular URL. That link is broken. You can no longer read the original article. My apologies. I found a few broken links as I've been doing this, and I try to find new links, but this one I didn't have one for you. Manitoba Justice Murray Sinclair made a stirring appeal to educators last week on behalf of Aboriginal students who continue to struggle in public schools. He asked for curriculum changes to ensure that every student is taught about the history of Aboriginal people in Canada and the legacy of residential schools. That's not a new request, but his presentation made it more poignant. Sinclair, a keynote speaker at the First Nations Education Steering Committee annual conference, not only called for change, but asked attendees for a personal commitment that they will set timelines for action and not rest until that goal is accomplished. The theme of the Vancouver conference was reconciliation through education, and a webcast of his speech can be found here. It's well worth a listen. Sinclair, who is the chair of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, said that the residential school legacy lives on, not only with survivors, but with their children and grandchildren. Yet many adults educated in BC know little about the schools or Aboriginal history generally. They're mentioning BC because this paper is from British Columbia. That's because history lessons over the decades have made little mention of Aboriginal people, and those that did presented them as dangerous savages, protesters, or largely irrelevant spectators during Canada's development, he said. That portrayal left generations of Aboriginal students ashamed and humiliated, he told his Vancouver audience. If you don't believe this, then you do not understand the implications of the continuing high dropout rates of Aboriginal children from our public schools. Sinclair succeeded in school despite these lessons, but it came at a cost. He compared his experience to that of the ugly duckling, a story he now reads to his granddaughter Sarah. Although he developed significant duck skills while in school and tried to be a really good duck, I always felt shame and confusion and sadness because I did not feel like a duck. One day, though, he discovered he was actually a swan. All students need to know that Canadian history did not begin in 1492, he said. They also need to know about the rich heritage of Aboriginals, including why they signed treaties, why they are fighting to defend these treaties, and why they've been ignored. In too many schools, he said, history lessons continue to promote misunderstandings, ignorance, and racism for one group, shame, humiliation, and festering anger for the other. A knowledge of history leads to understanding, and understanding leads to respect, he said. Reconciliation follows. As commission chairman, Sinclair said that he has visited hundreds of communities and been approached by many people who said they were educated in BC schools, universities even, but knew nothing about the residential schools. He acknowledged the fierce competition for attention from other subjects in the K-12 curriculum, but said that if Aboriginal issues are taught as electives, there will still be people in 5, 10, and 15 years who don't know anything about residential schools and their fallout. I want to prevent that from happening, and I want you to help me, he said. Sinclair recommended curriculum developed by the Legacy of Hope Foundation. It was interesting because as I was researching this, by the way, I stumbled across a particular, I can't remember the name of the forum, but it was a forum where people were talking back and forth and they were quite young. And they were all talking about like, oh my gosh, everybody knows about the residential schools. How could people not know? That's all they talked about in school. And it's like, yeah, you know what? I'm 55. It is not talked about when I was in school. I never heard anything ever about residential schools. And I took history at least till grade 11. And I did, well, my university stuff was not history based, it was more like English and literature, but it was not talked about. It's talked about now because of this commission. So that's a change that's kind of already occurred, right? The big thing here is that it became a part of mandatory learning in schools rather than just electives. Electives are optional. You can choose them. So if you didn't choose to sign up for like an Aboriginal course, then you wouldn't know anything about it. And the big thing there is then everybody coming out of school is at, I won't say the exact same starting point, but everybody at least has some basic knowledge about these events. Because people who are older who didn't learn this stuff in school don't necessarily have it, because not everybody reads the paper. Not everybody follows stuff on the radio. There are lots of people that I run into that know literally nothing about residential schools, which I know up here seems really surprising, but in Southwestern Ontario, it's not actually that surprising. So that's why this was such a pivotal kind of moment. This is the Legacy of Hope curriculum, in case you have any interest in looking here. It's really designed for teachers. It has all sorts of resources, podcasts. It's a great site to help somebody. If you happen to end up in a teaching position, this is something to think about. Some things are free, some things are paid resources, right? But if you're working for a school, obviously you could get the school to kind of help out and pay for things. All right, so 2 assignments today, both of which are basically internet research kind of assignments, and both kind of involve summarizing the information that you learned, okay? Tomorrow is Friday, and we will have one more class tomorrow, and then we will be finished week 6. If you have any questions, give me a phone call. I'd be happy to talk to you.